Hi, folks. Nick Dockert here with the Historical Fencing Guild. Before we get this program going, I have to pay some bills. So, first and foremost, we want to put a shout out to our good friends over at the Independent Creator Directory, IndieCD.org, your one stop shop for the best and the brightest authors, artists, and musicians. We also want to remind you that we are made possible by sales of the Simple Sword, the Fighting Axe, and the Simple Spear, all part of my ongoing series of Western martial arts manuals designed to help you go from having never handled a sword to teaching the art to others. And we are made possible, of course, by our amazing Patreon patrons who there's so many of you, I'm starting to have trouble getting the names rattled off. You guys are incredible. Everything you do helps me keep this channel running a little longer. And it sort of supports all my different efforts. We are at a point where I'm drawn just a little thin ahead of StompCon, which is a convention that I will be holding, and I do need to talk about that. Is it correct this time? Yep. Nope, that's not correct. That is the old StompCon overlay. Give me just a minute. We're going to briefly switch fields for just a second so that I can get the overlay I need. But StompCon is a free-to-attend gaming indie tabletop gaming convention that will be held September 13th, 2025, in just over a month, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern at the Benton County Co-op Extension, 410 South Aidway A, Fowler, Indiana, 47944. This is a great situation an opportunity for you to come out and meet me, meet many of the other guild members who regularly attend. I will be happy to discuss at length your questions and comments, make personalized equipment advice, basically anything to be of service to you guys as my audience. So let's see, we have that set up. There we go. Now, today's episode, we got some comments coming in. Let me double check. Okay, cool. First through the door is Joe. Good morning, Joe. Hello, Houston Dave, and good morning, Thesis. Or good morning, good evening. I'm out of it. I may have taken a nap right before the show, and it feels like it's a brand new day. New Hawaiian shirt, new day. You know how it goes. But we do have some things we need to discuss. Right now, there are no big sales going on Purple Heart Armory. Hello, John Miner. Great to hear from you. Been quite a while, John. And I hope you are healing and recovering well. John was recently in a rather severe, at least to mere mortals, motorcycle accident. And from what I've heard, he is recovering. And it's very good to hear from him in the chat. It's interesting that John is here because last week I spent most of the episode kind of doing a bit of lecture on something that seems the HEMA guys don't really understand, that you really need to talk to the SCA heavy guys or Bohurt to understand. And that is that shields and helmets, face protection, head protection for heavy blows need a certain amount of weight to stay in place and absorb the blow, because apparently there's a rash of concussions going on across several of the different HEMA groups, as well as injuries. So I've kind of paused a lot of my planned discussions to dive into the likeliest causes and the prevention that can be done, because what we're seeing is very much the case of either gear that hasn't been maintained, gear that hasn't been tested, or gear that otherwise wouldn't do what they're trying to get it to do. And we're seeing injuries. This is why I feel the core of it, no matter what, has to be calibration and control. Um, and I do not see a lot of calibration in a lot of the HEMA techniques. They are using stout techniques, and the problem is if you're using proper techniques with a steel sword, many of which was geared towards going against other fully armored opponents. We are talking hard over soft, steel chainmail, gambeson, a bulky amount of equipment compared to what people are trying to spar in now. Your arms must always match the armor which you are wearing, and vice versa, as well as they should match each other. These are some of the tenets that I set down when I started how I wanted the Historical Fencing Guild to function. Because we have to have tenets like this because we have so many people who cross styles and equipment regulations. So, what does that mean? That means things like if you are using plastic trainers, then you need to be using, both sides need to be using plastic trainers. If you are using, steel fetters, if you're using, blunted steel swords, those are still blunted swords. You need considerable protection and considerable calibration. Because what happens is a lot of people train for accuracy, especially from the HEMA side, the WMA side, which is beautiful. It is great. If you're going to do it, you have to do it right. But you also have to match the real world equivalent of what you're going against. And as if anybody here, John can attest, having been he was an SCA heavy fighter for quite some time. I say was because right now he can't because of obviously his health condition. And as he recovers, we'll find out what he is, cleared to do safely. But you can't expect imbalanced arm and armor pairings to function. Now, how many times, as somebody who's been around SCA heavy fighters or bow hurt guys, have you seen somebody who's fencing, especially if they're using a foil or an epee, and gone, the phrase is "parry this antenna boy" was bandied around a lot, and there's truth to it. An epee style blade as a trainer real world item is not geared to be effective against chainmail or even registerable. It's meant for much lighter armor because that armor is meant to keep you safe and not simulate armor. It gets worse when you look at historical manuals and you forget the background. So, when you look at most of the masters, especially the early masters, you were expected to be approaching with a certain level of physical education that we do not have as civilized people usually. Obviously, there are exceptions, but a great many people are not taught how to grapple. A great many people do not understand fisticuffs, its pros and negatives. A great many people haven't learned to fall down safely. and it shows. Now, I understand fully. I am a little out of my lane here because it is my lane, it is my passion and my habit, if you will, to very. I have a very specific audience I prioritize, and I do that in part because I found my niche. And my niche is helping people who would be considered non-standard students in combat sports, martial arts, etc. Um, Adaptive training, uh, scaling of weapons. Big guys don't bounce like little guys. Things break more often. Well, here's the thing. I mean, John, you have to look at the forces involved. You've got you're taller, so there's more leverage. There's more weight in play. There's also, and not to diminish the tactical assessment of large people, but when you have been so big that you can just brush off a lot of things that a little guy would not be safe physically absorbing. Okay? Your approach and acceptance of impact tends to be different. Anybody who is small has to especially who's established in dealing with multiple or larger opponents or both. I do appreciate the 2 inches of height that I gained in college. I dislike that some of it has been taken away from me. But there is always, and it starts to become reflexive, the of avoidance is a much higher priority, and it is something we drop to much earlier out of necessity. This is why, in part, oh, absolutely, absolutely, you can absorb a higher blow and return it at an increased impact. Yes, you got to start thinking. Okay, let me put it this way: naval vessels. Naval vessels. You take a heavy, take the battleship Missouri. You can open up on the side of that with a 50 caliber machine gun, and it's going to blink at you, go, "Oh, really?" and make you an oil slick on the bottom of the ocean. Now, a 50 caliber machine gun to a patrol boat is a very different animal to encounter. But it does mean in the physical combat situations and in the impact situations, I've noticed larger guys don't tend to be prepped for a surprise hit that is bigger than they expect. And what that tactically gives a smaller guy in both a defensive situation, a real world defensive situation, and a martial situation, as I found out, if you get to surprise them once, you get, as a little guy, if you can pull something off, you only get to pull it off once. And it either has to completely devastate them as an opponent and slash or allow you enough time, speed, momentum to either escape the situation or grotesquely upgrade your. I gotta say this in ways that YouTube won't come at me for. So give me a second. Greatly escalate the form and function of your response. Does that make sense? Because it's a lot like a lot of people will tell you, if you get in a fight, one of the first things you hear, especially women, is, hit them, knee them, whatever, in the groin. I will immediately say and follow with re-stomp the groin. But there is a downside to that. Being whoever you are, if you hit an opponent, be it a sparring match, a refereed event, a training session, a melee situation. In this case, I don't mean melee as in hand-to-hand. I mean melee as the SCA defense definition, as a large group combat situation. If it doesn't take them all the way down and you don't either escape the situation or immediately neutralize the threat in an appropriate and legal fashion, and if it seems like I'm being verbally careful, it's because I am. When that individual gets back up, and I have seen them get back up, it is rare for big guys to open up with everything they have. Okay? That's part of the fear of the little guy, because the little guy has to. A little guy may get one shot, and they got to put everything they have into the one shot that's going to do whatever they're going to do. But the big guy usually doesn't, unless they're very, very, very angry and they have forgotten themselves, in my experience, or, and this is where the mindset that they tend to transition to, if you do a sudden, otherwise debilitating attack that is insufficient to take them out of the game or allow you to leave the game, so to speak. Now you're dealing with a different entity. And you have to keep that in mind. Now, that got away from our original topic. And our original topic in this case being that we need to understand and prevent injuries. But to understand any physical conflict, okay, optimally, when we are sparring, we are doing so as a conversation, as an educational conversation. It can be fun, and you win points, lose points, but whatever our field is, it should be, a conversation. Ironically, it should be a civilized conversation in that sparring situation. There are rules, there is discussion, there are boundaries, expectations, and they should be respected. If you are not respecting these rules, people get hurt or killed. If you are not respecting your body's set of rules, you can be hurt or killed. And I will tell you this, and I will tell you this, and I will tell you this. Physics doesn't care about you. Okay? As long as we are dealing with hand-to-hand based situations, the larger person with the longer reach and more strength has a tremendous advantage. Now, a lot of martial artists, a lot of trainers will come up and say, oh, no, and they will give you this line of stuff. And there are some aspects. A hard fall to a big guy does tend to be more damaging, especially if you understand the fact that larger gentlemen, especially heavier larger gentlemen, tend to have the same types of injuries that can be exploited from a practical mindset. They also have many of the same advantages, being that a large gentleman is like a pickup truck, okay? A pickup truck, off the light, red turns green, let's go. If you're drag racing or whatever, it can leap forward in the extremely short range. We're talking a couple car lengths. Why? Because it has so much torque, so much explosive energy built in that initial short-range impact that it is very, 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 very dangerous because they move fast. If they have any training or any level of physical fitness by necessity. This is where it gets very hard because as a little person, comparatively, and I was discussing this, I am an average sized male. No, you haven't exploded on anyone, John. No. And I have never seen you nearly break physics warping forward and shocking the pants off of somebody who is smaller but cockier. I've never seen that. No. Not in the nearly 30 years I've known you, John. We're going on 30 years, my friend. And John's not shady enough to explode, but make sure his first step lands his foot on top of yours as he's doing it. No, I have never seen the Baron of the Shield Bash, the Sultan of Shield Bash. I like the Sultan better. Hi, Grims. I have not heard enough from you lately. Please reach out so that we can have proper conversations, and you know who else you need to reach out to. But I'm very glad to hear you. As a smaller person, the only space we can operate in is inside their strike range. Now, this presents a problem, and I think I'm going to find myself bringing out my digital whiteboard to discuss this, because I had this question kind of pointed at me recently. So I'm going to get this set up, and I'm just going to get a decent pen. What size are you? 5. Let's go 7. Make my life a little easier. Okay, cool. I'm setting this up because I only need one screen to give you guys more space, and I will present this. Not today. I had to catch up on some sleep. Oh, wrong one, wrong one. There we go. Cool. Now we're going to go here. Nope, nope. We're going to go here. Alrighty. Now, what I'm talking about is we've discussed reach a lot. We've talked about proportionate, and yeah, you've never picked up a knight with a glaive and threw out the field. You've also never done a draw cut and launched me 15 feet in the air by that logic. And while we're lying, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd be happy to sell you. So, we have a larger person. Why did I start that relatively small? I don't know. Oh, I know why, because I want more room to work on the board. His reach is probably going to be something, and right now we are looking at just open-handed. Okay, we're not getting into the weapon balance, and it is a little oval because it gets different. But okay, his band of attack is here because there's a little tiny bit, the vast majority up close. Yeah, you have to get really inside of. Their motion, and I have found that guys can move usually, you know what, twice their band of attack. Okay, here, shoulders, just to make this a little easier for you to see what this person is. Okay, we're looking from above. That gives the problem to, and I don't want to use yellow as that color because that will annoy me, so I will grab blue. Actually, green. I don't want good guy, bad guy terms too hard in this. Little guy, right? And again, this is from the top. That's a little exaggerated. Let's do something a little bit more like this because we're not dealing with children. There we go. His band is something like this because actually, hold on. Not that far back. You can go backwards faster than you can go forwards for a couple steps, and we're going to talk about that. Yes. One of the big problems you missed last week was very popular in HEMA circles are what look like bib gorgets, for lack of a better word. Red Dragon makes them. Beautiful padding on the collarbones, sometimes into the shoulders. Beautiful front bib, and then a Velcro closure or an elastic back, kind of like the back end of a mask. It does not support and prevent motion of the neck at all, which is exactly the issue we were talking about last week. So for this guy to be effective, actually, I know how I should have done it anyway. He needs to get in to about here, okay, to reach. That's a problem. That's the problem he has to overcome. So making that motion, do you see how quickly somebody can get balled over in an initial conflict if they try to meet force with force? And this can be, oh, absolutely. Shields need to be constructed to not fail from a heavy blow and to absorb. Right. A mix of flexibility and weight. I don't have it up here because I put it all away after I discussed we acquired, thanks to Richie, two of the uh, cold steel targes, the the soldiers' charge. They're center bosses basically, and there was some discussion of how heavy they are. So that's what we were talking about there. I had some people ask notes, so we're going a little farther. If this is the case, so if we go here, and I need to write for a second. If red can quite literally steamroll green, how then does green have any chance? All things being otherwise equal. The answer is they don't. So they have to deal with altering one of the primary functions that determine martial arts. So you have range, how far they move in one tempo, one beat, reach, how far they can reach. And don't never use never use the a word in describing the word. Far they can extend to interact with their opponent. And timing. Timing gets to be the interesting thing here. Timing becomes the key aspect to understand of this as a problem. How well they plan and execute. You need to think about this. Actions in combat. And yes, John's arm length with case is 13.5 feet tip to tip standing still. Yeah, that's without a lean, because you could actually extend any given one nearly 1.5 feet. That's without another 6 to 12 inches of grip adjustment, depending on what style of weapon you're using. Uh, and you're still not the biggest person I've ever had to spar with. Heaven help us. So let's look at this. Range. When both parties are moving equally, you can maintain distance uh, or outpace them. So let's look on this point. We're going to look at rough acceleration arcs. Uh, and this is again for the observed and general. So I'm not going to use numbers per se. Time, speed. Okay, I want that blocked off so there's a confusion. The larger person's acceleration spikes and then cuts off. They can still get faster, but their acceleration spikes right here. Traditionally, again, all things being equal, there will always be exceptions. The smaller person's looks a bit like this. This area is where you don't want to be, time-wise. You can't be trying to outspeed them from the same basic point, from a same start point, there. This means the smaller person almost always has to start out on the defensive. To get past this, the smaller person needs to be expecting that. So they have to detect, they have to start. Okay, let's see. Because there's a rhythm to this. So green has to be moving away before red can spike. Okay? Which means you have essentially a 7'1" reach. This is problematic as that's the far end of your band of attack. The only thing that saves slightly is your arms are large enough that the band narrows. This is why fighting close. Absolutely. John cheats. I've said this before. But what you get then, so what this yields, what you have to do is wait for red to have made their jump that lurched forward in speed. Because at this point, and at this point, speed-wise, red is at its most vulnerable. This is the safer one because this opens up a band where green has the speed advantage. But if green can take this first flat there is right here a lurch, a point where the sudden acceleration cuts off. Much like if you could time an attack at the exact point a lunge is thrown, and you can counter while they are at their most extended, there's a point of vulnerability because they have to regather in some way to recover. Okay? At that moment, green has a window of opportunity where they're more mobile and they can get in because John mentioned it and makes it real interesting, especially with the swords. So we're going to come back here, but we're going to talk about something. This was geared towards arm reach. And in arm reach, hand to hand, it's much narrower, this inside circle. But that's still a band. This is your band of attack. So if red's using a sword and has very long sword, his band of attack is at full circle, usually. And yes, I know, John, I know I've seen you throw shots, but we have to accept that you are in many ways the outlier, not the norm. There is an inside once a weapon is involved. This is why sword and dagger in my humble opinion, hold on. Back here. Is greater than case. Oh, no. I just have to remind it. I've never said I'm the norm. No, you have never been the norm, John. Because with case, even though you have two swords, you still have the same band of attack. One, a dagger gets put in, so we'll use blue. It looks something like this. So you have an inner defense. But if green can get in here with a short weapon, for most people it becomes cake and ice cream. There have been occasions where when faced with opponents such as John or other types, I have, especially if they're wielding case being, okay, hold on. Case in this is short for case of rapiers. or two swords. See also Florentine. But that's where I live. Well, that's because, John, you weren't just solely trained in Western combat theory, and you weren't solely trained in sword and long knife theory. This, however, is where I've had to develop a set of means that make it possible, not likely, but it goes from an impossibility combat wise to a possibility for the people who can't rely on that. Now, understanding that timing and that timing point where reach and range both stop violently is the only way a smaller 24 case is my preference. Mine too, John, between 24 and 30. But then again, John gave me this beautiful weapon, which give me just accept. That has, of course, been my obsession, and I desperately need both a case of practical fighting versions of a 1783 Charles III colonial broadsword. Ironically, this is not considered a rapier because the guard is uniquely appropriate for me, and while it gives protection, it doesn't allow me to get as easily wrenched by a stronger hand. This is why, going back to our conversation, and I see what you're doing, John, but we're gonna talk about that too. We require, as a smaller opponent, more than anything, we have to know our range, we have to know our reach, but our timing. Timing, my friends. Timing. It has to be superb. Washington's Dimitri Saber 1774 is not a bad choice either. I know what you're talking about. That's why I do my nightly drills with it's changed names a couple times. They called it a wolf head saber for a while. They called it a safe for a while. But yeah, things like that. And John also knows I have no problem with the subtle curve in the blades. But timing. Sorry, I got to clean up, but I don't want to lose things. Conceptually, guys, this goes back into why one. Actually, I hate writing in red. It just creeps me out. There we go. One, calibration must be constantly maintained 2. Oh, absolutely. The tempo of the fight can control. Yes, it changes everything. But understanding the tempo, understanding the timing is something a smaller fighter can change more than their range and their reach. Calibration must be constantly maintained. Why? Here, you know what? Here, let before we get into 2. Actually, you know what? No, we need 2. We need 2 to cover 1. 2. Paired drilling and sparring respectfully, of course, are required. This offends people. This offends people. And I am okay with that because I am correct in this. Now, if you're doing Tai Chi for health, as a form of stretching, dance, etc., if you are hitting a heavy bag to burn off steam, these are great actions. If you're beating the tar out of a Pel or doing point control drills, these are great actions for building a basis. They are not, however, adequate to maintain or understand your calibration, nor any of the range factors. Oh, okay. Thank you. I look forward to that. I'm glad you're still around, Grim. I just unfortunately have to get through this stream. Give me about 10 minutes. Because, you know what? Here, we'll just do this again. I'm not even going to mess with it. And I will leave this in red. People tend to drill stationary. Oh, yes, John. An instructor must always calibrate their own position to allow the openings and situations for their students. Yes, I totally agree. But people tend to drill stationary. This gives 2 problems. One, most targets aren't stationary. You have to train against moving targets. Nothing different. Nothing. There's no workaround. You have to train against moving targets. You can train against moving targets that are, we use moving, the swinging point control drills, things like that. But your targets aren't stationary, and that factors into your 2 problems. Calibration is tack. Oh, sorry, that shouldn't be. Do this like this. Tack strength plus momentum. If a student throws a shot at a target standing still, it is just the arm. If a student, so hold on, sorry. If a student throws a lunge, there we go, with the sword outstretched like a lance, it is the momentum. Don't let it fool you. Don't let the elegance fool you. If you hold the sword out and you do a lunge at somebody, you are just shoulder checking them. It's the exact same thing as coming in with one of these, but on an area this big. You're not putting any extra movement unless you actually do add that extra movement. But if you cock back, and we're just going to focus on step, then extend. Okay? If you do it like this, so these two things are happening nearly at the same time, you get significantly more force. When you see this a lot is when you see Spanish, footwork, with Italian blade work. And what you get in that situation, and this is very important, is an amount of force you don't realize you were throwing significantly harder, and you simply cannot control. How to fix. Also, don't use Spanish footwork. And Italian blade work. Whoops, lost my thing. Lightly. So we're going to put that there. I have addressed it. Moving on. How to fix. 1. Drill. You knew the word drill was going to come out of me. The 4 count lunge. Extend. Step. Retract. Recover. At target. Okay. I will never name the person to whom you are referring, John, because I will never give him notoriety or attention, be it fame or infamy. That individual is a pustule on the face of swordplay, and is not someone I will ever do anything in my power to aid, encourage, or support. So yes. Anyway. That being said. So that's why. Yeah, oh yes. Two. Slow work drills with partner and supervision. You work through it. You work through it calmly. You do your drills. You find your ranges. Sticking with same length weapon. Do not switch your weapons around a lot when you are learning. Now, you can see me. I can switch any sword simulating object I own. I can switch all the way from a knife simulator that is, only has a blade this long to the longest we have on hand is a 9-foot spear, I believe. And that's recovery. That's the point of recovery, John. Actually, no. That's the point of retract. Sorry. Okay. Retracting is you've thrown the attack and you've come back into a guarded position. You may have to fight from that for a second before you recover either forward or backwards from a 4-point lunge. So yeah, it is the transition right in here, and that is the base. That's the basis of the project. But that's also not what we're focusing on. See, we have a fairly clear curriculum step by step, and we can't jump ahead because whenever we jump ahead, it runs the risk of isolating or confusing the the new student. That's just why everything is so ordered and ordinal. Slow work drills with partner supervision, and then sparring at speed. Okay? Because right now we are working on a single focused item. Not how to be a better fencer per se, how to be a safer swordsman, and how to prevent the very specific set of injuries that have been occurring throughout HEMA. I said I'd talk more about it. I talked about the equipment side more last time. I wanted to get into the real nuts and bolts of the physical theory. And I think we've covered that. What we have here, guys, and I'm sorry, let me just pull that off because I won't be needing that anymore. And why is that being weird? Oh, well, we'll worry about this later. What we have here is a situation where we've been able to look at what our original problem was, which is how are people getting hurt and why. We looked in the previous video and some earlier discussion that there were equipment failures. So tips weren't inspected, armor wasn't inspected, tips weren't being used at all, which is insane. And there wasn't enough training, certainly not enough supervision. We transitioned into the other more common injuries, including injuries of the head and neck, wherein we spoke of the need for both, briefly mentioning shields because they operate similar, for helmets to retain the weight, to keep the head from being able to be jostled as much, to keep it secure, preventing concussion. We talked about the gorget, protecting the spine and throat from impact, protecting the arteries from impact, but also literally being a collar to prevent overextension and sudden extension of the head so you don't accidentally, Steven Seagal Loves America, and have broken spines, again, concussions, injuries like that. If the head can't jostle and it's supported, a bell rings on your head, maybe you fall over, but you don't break your neck. That's kind of important. All that is the defensive side of it. We could also add on, because somebody will be snarky later and say, don't get hit. Get good, scrub. And there's some truth to that. There is absolute truth to that. But tonight, in the last hour or so, we've been able to go over the training side of things. The necessary and fundamental how to prevent the harder shots and how to get around without needing them. Because a great many people's response to being the lighter person is to be, I have to be faster and I have to jump out of the gate. I know, I did it. It's how my buddy Lito and I came together and cracked 5 of my ribs, I cracked 3 of my ribs, tore 5 of them from the sternum, and nearly killed me, though I was encouraged not to discuss it at the time. Now I have no such qualms. because I don't want somebody getting hurt. Now, part of that was no failure of the armor in that there was nothing to deflect, and what the literal tip of the rapier, thank God it was a blunted rapier, wedged into the space between the affected ribs near the sternum, and because of that, the alignment of his arm locked in, so he fully extended and locked his elbow, which you are not supposed to do unless you're actually trying to kill somebody, and drove it in. My failing in that was I broke off the attack without maintaining my own defense. I was wrong in that part. Because I saw I don't want to skewer him. It didn't occur to me in that split moment that he both was in the same position I was and did not catch on. He didn't see what was going on. I don't hold any animosity to her. It was a sparring mistake. It is something I have worked hard to go, what happened? How do I fix it? How do I make sure this never happens to anybody else on my watch? And no more hush hush. Thanks, Grim. So, here we are. And isn't it funny? It comes to doing your drills, your fundamentals, and then sparring. Isn't it funny how simple, logical, frankly, in some ways, boring steps can prevent problematic and at times life-threatening excitement? Remember, our goal in what we do is to have fun unaliving each other and then go out for a really good hamburger afterwards with your buds. When it's practical, when we're looking at this from self-defense, I still want you in that mindset. Because that's what's going to legally protect you. By maintaining control of yourself. This is vital. And I hate seeing people get hurt when they don't have to. So I hope this was an educational program to you. It was not quite as loopy and fun as some of our others, but every once in a while I have to remind you guys, one, what being on topic looks like, and what needs to be discussed relative to what we do. I'm thinking next week we'll probably have to talk about gear pricing and how we're going to approach it in yes, there were rails today, and I fenced with them, but and how to approach it in this time of tariffs, because imports are going to spike further. Certain materials are going to spike further. How are we going to balance out and tolerate this, and what are our options? Now, many years ago, I established that I prefer American-made goods for what we do. Part of it being, loyalty to country of, origin. Part of it being presumed and usually proven quality of materials. And part of it being, in the long run, it's a better idea. This is that long run I was talking about. So I'm going to be looking to see if I see a big spike in the next week or so, or if the spikes have already hit. We're going to see how that goes, how that affects shipping, you know, and how to work around it. I understand that many of you are knocked down even further budget wise, so we may be doing some truly uh, old style, started at the bottom level gear discussions again to remind you that at nearly no point should the gear to do what we do be fully exclusionary. All right? Huge thanks again to my patrons for letting this be possible. Huge thanks to everybody. I can't wait to see any number of you September 13th at the Benton County Extension, 410 South Adaway in lovely Fowler, Indiana. For StompCon, we will have live gaming. Hope we have vendors. I am still accepting paid table space for both vendors, organizations, food vendors, things like that. But you have to make sure all your paperwork is in place. And game runners. So if you have a game you want to run, if you want to volunteer to help out, I'm going to be looking for volunteers because I want to set up a just a free tabletop gaming, and we're talking it could be Monopoly there as a means to raise funds, sell my books and stuff. In one bit of notice, I do hope to have the Rapid Rapier, which will be a condensed, simplified, single weapon only. Book, because people have asked me for, Nick, we love that you gave a full sword master's manual. Can you give us something simpler? So I'm pulling out the parts that only apply to that, and I have upped the font size per request. I am working on expanding a few sections. It's been a while since I wrote the Simple Sword, and getting that where it will be something that people who are teaching out of the Simple Sword can use as low-cost student guides for at least that aspect. We will be looking into that. All right, but more will be revealed next week, as always. Guys, keep your guards up. Do your drills. Be kind to yourself and each other. And as always, thank you for supporting your local swordmaster. I'll be back next week. If you're watching on Kick or Twitch, all my other shows run through those channels as well. If you're watching on YouTube, only the Historical Fencing Guild stuff is here. The rest of the stuff is on the Nicholas Tucker channel over there. That's just an insurance situation. It covers my butt because I do discuss martial arts here and occasionally weapons and trainers. So there you go. Stay safe out there, guys. I'll see you next time. Toodles.